politics. I'm Buford Terrell, professor of law at South Texas College of Law, and with Ben Dunaire, we're your host for tonight's program. We have with us as our guest for tonight Cleo Glenn Johnson, with the Black United Fund of Texas, and currently a vice president with Narconon, a narcotics rehabilitation service. And we also have with us Felix Glenn of the Black United Fund of Texas. Nice to have you both with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Before we go into a discussion, there are a couple of news items that have come up since the last show. First is, in spite of what looked like a clear intent to sign the law, Presidente Vicente Fox of Mexico refused to sign the proposed bill legalizing possession of small amounts of drugs in Mexico. The story is apparently that he succumbed to strong pressure from the United States government in so doing. There was a new set of stories going through the public press this week about the new drug arising among children, that being over-the-counter cough syrups, which contain DXM, a well-known hallucinogen. They are presenting this as a brand new drug that just popped up for kids to get high on. Unfortunately, even though that's the same story we hear every couple of years about some brand new drug surfacing, DXM and drinking cough syrup have been around for at least a couple of generations. It does seem to be more attractive to younger people down through middle school and even possibly into the higher elementary grades. How many people are involved, there's no way of knowing yet, but it's certainly not the scare epidemic that the popular press has presented. Do you have anything to add, Bindu?
That's kind of new news to me. I've always heard of the chugging a bottle of cough syrup. And
well, remember though, there are two different kinds of cough syrup use.
Right.
The lean or the slow that we've heard about for a long time is prescription cough syrup containing codeine, which means that it's an opioid just like heroin or morphine or Oxycontin or any of the others. The DXM is in the over-the-counter preparations like Robitussin. Mm-hmm. And rather than being an opiate sedative, it's an hallucinogen, but it's also one that in overdose can be fatal, which means that it's a whole lot more dangerous than the standard hallucinogens that we see.
Mm-hmm. And the first news item, I thought it was pretty disappointing that Vicente Fox, after he penned the actual bill and spent 2 years writing the decriminalization in Mexico, he didn't sign it. Government pressure from the U.S., I mean, too coincidental. So
sometimes when you live next door to the biggest kid on the block, you tend to do what he says. Let's go to our guest tonight. Ms. Gwen Johnson, tell us about Narconon, what they do.
Well, Narconon is the world's largest alcohol and drug residential facility in the world. We provide only vitamins and nutrients, minerals, sauna, organic foods, and exercise. It's a dry sauna, by the way, and exercise to help people get off the drugs. And Narconon has been around 40 years. And we have 120 locations, and we're in 40 different countries.
That sounds like it's been a pretty successful program. You say it's residential. How long do your clients normally stay in residence?
They basically can stay as long as it takes.
Okay.
Because there is no set pattern for any one individual to be able to come off of drugs at any set time. And so as long as it takes is the length that we, in fact, keep people.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I know that most of the research shows that it's not an easy job for most people, and that quick week-long or 2-week-long detoxification programs don't really deal with the issues that people have. So I'm certainly glad to see a program that deals with the length of time that rehabilitation takes, as well as immediate detoxification.
Well, see, our program is very involved because of the fact that they, once a person come in, and generally when we get people, they have gone through 12, 15, 20 different other programs.
Yeah.
They're just about on their last leg, and we get them, and we have to rebuild the body and safe point the person in order for them to be able to be coherent so that we can actually work with them. So we start to give them vitamins, and we give them things to help settle their bodies and give them assists. We do things, I guess you can call it the old-fashioned way, because we really do help people through the body assist that perhaps your mother and my mother may have done when we were small, when you would get hurt, and they would soothe your pain away.
Yeah.
Well, part of that is what we do in our therapy. And then you have to help people confront why they're even doing drugs. I mean, because just to get them off of drugs, it's not enough if they can't confront why they're doing
Well,
drugs.
I think that's one of the things that I have seen the most, is that drug use is much more a symptom than it is
That's right.
a disease itself. That
Right.
the people that have trouble with drugs are those that were having trouble of some kind or another before they ever started with the drugs.
Exactly, exactly. And so we look at it as a condition because it can be cured. People can, disease is like it's going to be with me forever. You don't have to be diseased forever. You, in fact, can mentally overcome being addicted to drugs.
Yeah. Well, with this long an experience pattern, what has been your experience with people after they complete your program and leave?
Well, one of the things that we've experienced, which has been really wonderful, many others have gone out to start Narconon programs. And that some of our programs in the country are, in fact, headed by people who have come through the program. So they have taken it to their community, whether it was in Italy or whether it was in Germany. We have people all over the world, and many of those people have come to the location where I am. I am at Narconon Arrowhead, which is in Canadian Oklahoma, which no one has ever heard of. And we're on this large state park. And
Right.
we're able to, we address anywhere from 178 to 200 people a day. And they live on the premises, and so we take good care of them.
I'm thinking that's pretty much a rural location, isn't it?
Very.
Yeah.
You inhale and you exhale.
Does that help to have them out of an urban or big city environment?
Yes, it does, because, even though nothing is 100% sure, but it's less likely. I mean, that's a long walk from where we are to the main road. And so, but, being addicts are very crafty, creative people. And so they manage to do all kinds of things. But the reality is that we found is when you take a person out of an environment, you give them an opportunity to relax, understand, explore, and just know who they are. And see, when they start to have that comfort level, because they're in peace and they're not being attracted by all the trappings, then it's easier for us to help them get off of drugs.
Well, yeah, I was thinking when you said that when I first heard it some time ago, it surprised me to find out that in federal prisons, the rate of drug use is about the same as it is on the streets, and in maximum security units, it's even higher. So, yes, you're right, that these are people that know how to get what they want.
You're right, they do. They do. And then when you consider that many of the things that, I know we're talking about politics tonight, however, many of the things that God has made, people have turned it into being those things that they can use to take them to another level.
Well, I know of one anthropologist who has studied drug use and claims that throughout history there have been something over 1,500 different plant products that have a psychological effect of some kind,
that's very
and
true.
that probably every society except for the Eskimos has used something at one time or another.
Well, and I'm sure that's probably the case because it's out there. Because all drugs, is a derivative of something that it has come from. And so it has a beginning. And it does, in fact, sometimes come from the earth. It's just what we do to it after we get home.
Well,
right. Yeah.
If you look at people like me, you can even abuse food.
Yes. Addiction of all sorts exists. Addiction of all sorts.
Well, you mentioned politics, and we have been joined by another guest, Councilman Johnson. Glad to have you with us tonight.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We're a little hard to find on this part of the city.
Especially
Maybe
doing
you
a
can do
baseball
something
game.
about that. So we're glad to have you with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Okay. Mr. Glenn, what's the interest of the United Fund in
Black United Fund? Our interest is in the community. Basically, we support other nonprofits that are in the community working. A lot of them are after-school programs, but some are senior citizen programs. Anything that will help sustain the agency to keep doing something good in the community, we try to support it best we can.
That would be a wide variety of nonprofits, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we're pretty much all over the city, from Acres Home to 5th Ward, Cashmere Gardens, 3rd Ward, South Park. Each area, they have their agency. Some are out of a park, some have their own facility, some do it in the school system. But if that person who is dedicated and found something inside of them that want to help their community, then we want to keep them motivated and keep them going. And a lot of times they run into money problems. So that becomes the main issue. They can't try to raise funds and at the same time do what they're doing in the community.
Yeah, and frequently ideas don't come with checkbooks.
Exactly. You're right about that. So we support them and keep them going, and it keeps a lot of kids from in a program that keep them from hanging on the corner and getting involved with drugs in the beginning. So,
if I may add a little bit to what the Black United Fund has been a part of, what Black United Fund has been successful in, and what Mr. Glenn has just pointed out, Black United Fund has been the mechanism that has given nonprofits the voice that they have needed. And oftentimes, nonprofits have struggled to find their own identity. Black United Fund has given nonprofits their identity and their voice. Oftentimes, when you talk about fighting or eradicating poverty or you're eradicating drugs, you have to talk about standing on your own morals or standing on your own mission. Buff has given many organizations that. Oftentimes, organizations are watered down in their thought process.
Yes.
They've been told that, well, you can't get funding if you pray to God. You can't get funding if you teach a culture, black culture, or even Hispanic culture, or whatever culture. Many organizations have strayed away from that, which has given them their life. Black United Fund has given many organizations just that breath to say, continue to do your mission, and do your mission is the best way you can to provide the voice for, or the power to the powerless. And so I've had the fortune of being a part of Black United Fund when I was the executive director of Phoenix Outreach Youth Center, in which we would go out and find the children and provide the needs that we recognize were their greatest impediment at oftentimes, whether it be the family's needs, whether it be the children's needs, whether it be the fact that they just need a spiritual leadership. This organization was able to provide it, but we couldn't do that had it not been for the tremendous support and the generosity of Black United Fund, giving us a mechanism to move into the workforce campaigns and solicit for income, solicit for dollars from people. Because based on what Buff has done, has given me the mechanism to now understand the self-help idea. The self-help idea means that organizations understand the strength from within. And when you understand your strength from within, then you stand on your own. You no longer wait for others to come in and do for you what you certainly can do for yourself. And I use that same model as a city councilman for my district. When I look at District B, I see a district that is very rich in history, very rich in culture, but at the same time is very rich in resources.
Right.
But oftentimes we wait and we wait for others to come into our community and provide for us the seed money or provide for us the ideas or provide. And when you become dependent, you only wait for others to come and support you. And oftentimes, if you're not on their priority list, then you don't get your needs met.
Well, you've said a couple of things there that it made me think. And one of the first ones was this idea of groups that are being based around their own culture. And I know several months here on this show, several months ago, I interviewed a young man that had put together a group for teenage boys. He started out as kind of a poetry session and rap group and kind of built them into a rap chorus, and then went into breakdancing and had a dance group that was actually doing a little touring. And the idea was this was something that the young men and boys were interested enough in that they would come in off the streets. And he probably wouldn't have done nearly as good trying to teach Mozart to them.
Right. You got to have that hook.
You've got to have that hook.
You got to hug them before you squeeze them, kind of.
It's got to be something that they know and are comfortable with to begin with. And the other thing that I was thinking when you mentioned this is that so many of us, when we get an idea, think, well, gee, I don't have the money to go out and rent a fancy building. I don't have money to put up billboards. I don't know how to go out and run a big fundraising campaign. And I think that what you're saying is that if you've got the idea and the drive, there are things like Buff that can help you put the rest of it together.
If I may qualify what I was saying,
Okay.
There was an organization early on when I begun to operate Phoenix Outreach that came to this organization when we didn't have anything. We had probably $130 in the bank and was in desperate need of funding. We had an opportunity of getting a $90,000 grant that would have supported the organization. But the grant was in the area of recreation. Well, my point was, wait a minute. In the area which we serve, the children in which we serve, they have 8 city-run parks. 8.
Yeah.
Staffed, manned. So we're putting a lot of dollars into recreation.
Yeah. And you need to go a different
We
way.
need to go a different way. But we said, look, can we take the money and use it? And again, it's their money. They do what they want.
Right.
They said, look, we'll give you the money, but we really need you to use it for recreation.
Yeah.
Another instance in which we recognize, well, we need computers and books, and we would loving to give, we want to give you that money. But can you give us the idea on, do you have to teach Black history? Okay, well, if you have to ask me, do I have to teach Black history? And if I become dependent on your money, then certainly you now hold, you control my thought process. And so again, Buff has given many organizations its identity. It's given its own stand. It's given them its own base to stand on. And so again, it's been given smaller organizations who had great ideas, and great mission statements, and great opportunity of reaching people, but oftentimes did the things that were on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
That oftentimes society has said, well, you can't really do that. No more praying.
It also looks like, to some extent, maybe you serve as a buffer between the donors and the organizations.
I guess you got a good point there.
Yeah.
I guess but let me just add, as you talk about your own culture, even when we funded groups that were in the Hispanic community, we could not afford to say to them, well, y'all can't celebrate Cinco de Mayo, that you can't. Because what's important for us making communities better, one, is simply by allowing people to understand who they are so they can be what they should be.
We have a caller.
Okay.
Caller, you're on the air.
Well, so just teach all of history and don't overlook the blacks. There's nothing better than good, clean food and good, clean fun. But I really wanted to ask y'all, outside of the U.S., in Mexico and the rest of South of America, I'm wondering what countries have the biggest drug problems and which countries have the smallest problems, and which drugs cause the most problems, and which ones cause the least. Personally, because you said that you had locations in many countries, I hope you might be able to answer that. But personally, I think that, the symptom of the scenario of kids sniffing glue in large urban cities can cause the greatest damage to those communities, and that only happens when everybody drops the ball.
Okay, thank you.
Well, when you talk about which country has the largest problem, which would have the smallest problem, there's no such thing as the largest or the smallest. Because if you have one too many, and that's real. All across this world, we're having children at age 9 and 10 years old in various South American countries that's shooting up, not just sniffing or drinking, but they're doing hard drugs because they're being exposed to it, and they're being actually shepherded in being able to do that. Narconon had recently, we had the government from Israel, we've had from Jordan, we have some people right now from Egypt, and so we have people coming into Arrowhead from all over the world wanting to get this technology to help get people off of drugs. And when you talk about the worst drug, what he's going to be surprised, the worst drug to get a person off of is not what you think it is. Alcohol is the hardest. Well, that's the other one, too. That's the other one, too. However,
and this one's the real killer.
And that's right. It may take a little bit longer, but in fact, it will do it. But here again, alcohol. Alcohol is the hardest because you got to do it on a gradient. You can't do it. You can't bring a person that's been on alcohol into any drug program and take them off just like that.
Because chances are that they'll die.
That's right. That's exactly correct. And so you have to do it on a gradient in order for them to gradually come off of it. And once they are able to handle not being on it, then we are able to then work with them. But we have managed to work with every kind of drug that you can imagine to get people off of. We've managed to get them off. Safely, by the way.
Yeah. To give a different response to the caller. To some extent, drug problems in Latin America are fairly new and are normally a byproduct of drug trafficking for the United States. For instance, if we look at the Andean republics, Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, the natives there have used raw coca for thousands of years with no ill effect. But as processed cocaine has been prepared for shipment to the United States and Europe, we're seeing more cocaine use in those areas. In Mexico, peyote use goes back well before the time of Cortez and has caused virtually no problems. Marijuana use is fairly old, fairly widespread, very few problems. Yet as Mexico has become the primary transshipper for cocaine coming into the United States, in the past few years, Mexico has started seeing widespread abusive use of cocaine. So to some extent, I think in Latin America, where we're seeing problematic drug use, it tends to be along the routes of major commercial illicit drug shipment.
And let me just add to you. You see, one of the things that we aren't very clear on is how many people are really using drugs, because of the fact that people in private facilities never get counted. You only count the people who are receiving public funds.
Yeah.
And so we don't have a real count on how many people are really on drugs. That's number one. So what's the wide usage? It's not really documented because of the people in private facilities. On the other side of that coin, you also have prescription drugs on the rise. Many people, we're getting a lot of people now that are actually being handled for prescription drugs. And we have a lot
suspect a lot of Xanax in particular.
Yes. Yeah. And then we also have the functioning addict, the person who's doing any and all kind of drugs, but he's still able to work, or he or she are still able to work in the community, still work on their jobs, but yet on weekends and after 7, they're generally addicts. Yeah, so we have a large number of people that we have no count of, and you still have about, we still haven't begun to treat half the people on drugs in this country, or in this world.
It's like The nearest thing to reliable statistics we have is probably the federal government's household drug use survey. Yet if you look at what that survey doesn't include, the homeless people, people in jails and prisons, and college dormitories, that survey has to be greatly understating the amount of drug usage in the country.
Truly. And then here again, when you talk about homeless people, and they're the ones who get really, they are taken through a process that tend to put on another drug. So they remain a drug addict, even depending, and they get their medication and they are able, we pay for it. In some states we give needles so people could do it clean, and that's not even real, because an addict doesn't care if the needle is clean or not. He just wants a fix.
Well, except in places that have introduced needle exchanges. The rates of infection for HIV
is very heavy.
And hepatitis C have both gone dramatically down. And I know as a city council member, you probably hear proposals or requests to introduce programs like needle exchange and things here in the city, but we have some problems with state law as well, don't we?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the laws when it comes to how do we fix the problem is nationwide. But for me, on how do we help alleviate the problem is to provide some sort of, or some similarities of hope for communities that have felt so hopeless for a number of years. The jobless rate is going up in some communities, which you have, when you see the jobless rate go up, you see the drug rate go up along with it. How do we fix that? We provide more economic opportunities for communities along with, or couple that with opportunities for social service to come in and provide the skills, the education needed for these communities. I've always said you start early. Build a foundation in youth. You don't have to worry about this later on. It's pay me now, pay me later. I think we've gotten to the mindset well, when they act up and they do wrong, we'll put them in prison and we'll fix them there.
Well, one thing I have noticed with a background in law is that if you go down to the state courts today, you'll see a large number of minor drug users that pretty much go straight to jail. Frequently, these are blacks. You see a large number of drug users that walk out the door on deferred adjudication or probation. These are largely white, and I'm not saying this is a strict classification, but
it's real.
One thing that happens is that if you take someone with my background, good middle-class white, I've always had that social support system. I've always had not only mother and father, but my grandparents until very late in life, aunts and uncles in the same town, all supported, all with surplus income, always not a lot, but some surplus. And without that kind of support system around all of the individuals, they have a pretty rough time in life. I mean,
you're
really lift the lid, dollars have a lot to say about it.
Absolutely. But we have to find mechanisms, and that's why the whole concept when I got on Black United Fund is that self-help mechanism, that self-help concept. And that's certainly what we need to look at when we're talking about fixing a problem in the community. When you talk about crime, you can't talk about crime without talking about drugs. And in the city of Houston right now, time is running out. In the city of Houston right now, when you talk about alleviating crime, you will start talking about alleviating the criminal element.
Well, we need to take a break now, but we will be back in a minute and continue this fascinating discussion.
Okay.
It's time to play Name That Drug by its side effects. A stirring in the loins. Women feel genital warmth and a desire to have sex. Men feel an enhanced libido. They feel younger, stronger, and more energetic. Time's up. The answer, according to Britain's Guardian newspaper, PT 141. Is this the drug that will save the rhino population?
This week in drug war history, May 14th, 1932, We Want Beer marches are held in cities all across America. 15,000 union workers demonstrate in Detroit alone. May 15th, 1928, Arnold Trebach, founder of the modern drug policy reform movement, is born. May 15th, 1988, Baltimore Mayor Kurt Schmoke writes in the Washington Post, decriminalization would take the profit out of drugs and greatly reduce, if not eliminate, the drug-related violence that is currently plaguing our streets. May 16th, 2001, Regina McKnight is convicted in South Carolina of using crack during a pregnancy that resulted in a stillbirth. It is the first time in U.S. history that a woman is convicted of homicide for using drugs during a pregnancy. May 17th, 2002, the Associated Press reports that the city of Santa Cruz, California, has decided to install needle disposal boxes in a dozen public restrooms to promote safety after several city employees are pricked by used needles. This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
Houston Normal is proud to present the Cannabis Response Unit. If you needed to know, we're here to help. Remember, it's up to you.
Well, we have been talking about support groups and really there being some learning involved. What does Narconon do about educating people about drugs?
Well, we have various facets. I mean, one we know that is really important is the Councilman stated that we have to do it early, pay me now or pay me later. Well, we do have a drug education, a youth drug education program that actually we've done all over the country, and right now we're doing a survey to see how the kids have been impacted by our type of education, because we don't go in to talk about just how, you know, if you do drugs wrong, I don't know what they do when they go in and talk about drugs from the other perspective, but I do know when we go in, we really talk about how drugs how it affects you as an individual, what it does to your body. So we really almost give a science class so that children will understand what the dynamics of that chemical, whatever it is, can do to you physically and mentally and eventually spiritually.
And that's so much better than programs that have previously, the DARE program was the major program for students and for youth, and actually studies have shown that it's been even counterproductive and detrimental to actually almost makes kids want to try drugs. It's just a very scare tactic type program, and they don't have any science to it. It's just, drugs are bad, don't use drugs. Well, what is a drug even? There's so many different things that you can abuse. So the DARE program actually lost a lot of its funding from the ONDCP. So that's what I really like how you're talking about.
It's also disappeared from a lot of school districts recently.
And now it has to be privately funded. That's why we were talking about, there's a scientific, it's more of a scientific approach.
Yeah, well, we do.
This is what the drug is. This is how it affects you.
That's right.
This is what it can do to you. This is why if you do use it, you should use it in moderation or know how it affects you.
And if you understand that a little bit might make you, perky, and a little more will make you sleepy, and too much will kill you. Well, they take you through the whole stages of what that can do to you. So our drug education program is to help the children understand what drugs can do to you. So they can, the reality we give them, and we call it mass, so that you will have something that they can touch, see, and feel so they can understand it. On the other part of our drug education program, we have a faith-based initiative where Reverend McLaughlin goes out and actually train ministers on how to do the first step in order to help ministers work with their congregations and their communities around them to help them get people through the process of withdrawal. Because withdrawal is the hardest part. Many people would rather stay on drugs than they get off of drugs because of the withdrawal process that they go through. However, the withdrawal process can be made easier through the first step that we provide people with. So we have two components here where we actually go out into the community and do hands-on with churches and community organizations as well as schools and children and youth groups.
Speaking on the drug you had mentioned earlier about kids doing cough syrup, and I saw on the news where they are talking about kids going in and just taking prescription drugs now and having parties with them.
The prescription drugs is more of a high school thing.
Yeah.
But I know, and this must have been 15 years ago, that I was talking to a young woman, and she said that she started selling drugs when she was in about the 7th grade, because she could stop at the convenience store on the way to school, buy a bottle of no-dose, sell the no-dose pills to the 5th and 6th graders at 50 cents a pill, and use that money to buy Ritalin from the kids that had Ritalin prescriptions that she could use to get high on. And that Ritalin, of course, is virtually the same thing
That's exactly
as amphetamines
That's right.
and speed. So, yeah, but it's been around a long time, and I think one of the things I see is that we tend to focus too much on drugs and not enough on the users. I know, and you've probably seen a lot of it, the so-called polydrug users. But you almost never find someone that just does one drug and stays with it faithfully.
And you know what is so strange is that we encountered a young man, I did, that would only do drugs at 9 o'clock at night on Fridays through Sundays, and then he wouldn't do it the rest of the week. And he only did like $30 worth. And I said, well, why did you come into the program? And he said, well, because I didn't want it to be turned into $3,000 a week. But I was glad that he had enough sense to know how to do that. But he was using 2 different kinds of drugs. And you know, and so you don't really see anybody just having, when we talk to them about their drug of choice, it's generally more than one. But for the most part today, the new thing, at least not really new, but the meth crave has just become just uncorrallable because of all the things and how they're actually doing it, because it has so many other effects, you know, making it, the environment being exposed to it, those people coming in contact with it.
Making crystal meth in home cookers is a major problem.
It is, very much so.
But amphetamines in general have been around since the 30s and have been being abused to some extent since the 1950s at least.
Right, exactly.
And I think probably if over the time you averaged in Benzedrine, Dexedrine, Ritalin, but probably there's not that great a jump in the amount of amphetamine use today.
That's true. That's true.
It's just been shifted over to meth.
And then you got a new thing here. You know, it's because, I don't know, is it that politics is comfortable with saying that we could have a drug zombie world and we can put everybody on some form of drug and say it's okay. Because you see, there are medications that we take that's very detrimental to the body, and they tell you that it might cause diarrhea, liver bleeding, shortness of breath, dysfunction. So if you read that, guess what you need to do? Not take that. Because if it's going to cause you some liver problems, some kidney problems, some lung problems, then why are we taking it? We're going to substitute one pain for another one. And the one that it causes can be more long-term and more detrimental than the one you call yourself addressing. You know?
When you begin to talk about how society has now dictated the drug use itself, when you talk about the Ritalins and you talk about these other drugs that our young children are getting on, we recognize that there are gateway drugs for them to use drugs at a later date because their bodies and their minds have been conditioned to mind-altering drugs. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the DARE program, when you talk about DARE was used for a specific purpose, and that was for drug prevention, not intervention. And when you look at the studies that have been done, you'll see where drug use for children in the 5th grade, in which the DARE program was introduced, the use of children using drugs were down. 6th grade, they were up. 7th grade, they were down because the DARE program is 5th and 7th grade, and then for the 8th grade, they were down, but in the 9th grade, they went up. For any program that we introduced,
by the time the kids finished high school, the DARE students were indistinguishable from the other students.
Exactly, because my point was, because with any program, especially when you're dealing with children, there has to be some sort of consistency. Exactly. You can't expect a child to take something that they learned in the 5th grade that was only introduced in an in-school program for 6 months of their life to be sustainable for over the course of their lifetime. But at the same time, when it's consistent across the board, you will find that those children will understand the concept of illicit drugs and drugs are being bad for your health and bad for your life, and that's why you saw fifth and seventh grade drug use was down, but in 6th and 8th grade they were up, and then in 9th grade they were constantly up. So we have to take a look at how do we continue to put our children in harm's way by constantly putting them on these drugs. I will admit that had I been a youngster in today's society, I might be a child who might be on Ritalin, because of the fact that the system doesn't allow for questions. Well, why? Why can't we go outside and play at this particular time? Or why is it raining? You know, and we don't encourage creativity or even our children being inquisitive these days without them being troublemakers.
Well, I have heard sarcastically that the main symptom for being prescribed Ritalin is being a normal boy.
That's probably right.
You're so right.
But also, once again, there are lots of studies that show that in appropriate cases, it's a very successful therapy. But all of this has brought up a question that I want to ask you and Mr. Glenn both, is that let's say that the city, through one of its programs, or BOF or some other agency, starts funding a group. It's a group that's got a lot of public support, but as time goes by and you start getting reports and feedback, it's no longer effective. How do you withdraw support from it, or how do you switch from something else?
Well, again, for me, from a city standpoint, from a political standpoint, I have to take a look at, not based on studies that are being done, but based on the results that are being put out. Studies can be spun any way you want them to be spun, even when it comes to studies that were done on DARE, because DARE
whichever way you do it, how easy is it for you to follow the facts as you find them, in spite of what the public pressure might be?
For me, I look at qualitative as opposed to quantitative. I don't care how many people you have reached. That's not important for me. What I care is, at the end of the day, the number of people that you reach, did you put them back into society, and how did that spell out for me in terms of dollars? No, I'm not going to give you $1 million to service 4 children or 4 people. But at the same time, if you did the job that you necessarily need to do it, you set out to do, then certainly that's how you're judged. If you come to a city entity or a government or agency and say, we're going to service 200 people, and at the end of the day, we service those 200 people, I want to know, what was your objectives? If your objectives was just to introduce drug prevention to them for adults, it's not good enough for me. I want to know, did you provide treatment, education, jobs? Did you put them back into society? Did you put the hope back into their life so that they don't feel it necessary or even compelled to go back into the drug environment?
Well, when they come in and ask for funding originally, do you ask for mileposts or checkpoints of things they achieve that they can be graded on later?
Absolutely. For me, it's always been about track record. It's always been about what have you done, because it's always harder to fund agencies that walk in and say, hey, I got a great idea. And when your great idea has never been tested, it's very hard to do that. I like to see programs that have come in that have said, we put our sweat equity into this, we put our own dollars into this, we have shown it to be a successful program, but now we need more support, or we need support to expand it.
And that's where Felix can come in,
right?
Because you can pick out the baby organizations and give them.
A lot of our agencies are mom and pop, so they're not big, but we're able to keep up and stay close to them, and to keep up with, and we know what they're keeping up with their children when they have them going, or the activities that they're in.
What kind of quality control do you exert?
Well, we do take information that you have to be around at least a year. You have to put your own spirit into it at first. You know, because like you said, at first when you come in and you talk about, oh, I have a great idea, everybody has a great idea with somebody else's money. And we don't want to use the funds that way. It's hard enough raising it and to keep it going for Black United Fund. So when you have your agency that's been around for a year, we take documentation, 990, your objective, your goals. We go out and look at your agency, the kids that you service. You might have, like we have an agency called Seha, and he has a facility that in his own sweat, he's raised money to rebuild his building that he had. And the kids he's teaching them karate. You know, their grades are good. We're able to go and see anytime the progress in his program. And those are the things that we judge our agencies by.
Then do you withdraw funding from those that don't carry through?
If we're going through
the next year.
Yeah, the next year, the following year, we if you haven't done anything or done what's good for the community, you're out serving yourself. Because let's face it, we have people who are out for themselves at times. So you always have good and bad. That's just part of life. And we try to weed those out as best we can.
So now we've got a group that he's been funding for 10 years. They're up to 100 students. They've got a good track record. They come to your office. Are you going to have a sympathetic ear at this stage?
Sympathy never comes into play when it deals with other folks' money. You're talking about what did they bring to the table. Everybody has a good story.
Yeah.
But again, what are your objectives?
Yeah.
And then from there, how can I champion you? For me, any nonprofit is just like any business.
Yeah.
In any business, you have to put in your money. You have to put in your spirit. You have to put in your time. I want to know, did you do that?
Yeah.
Did you put in so that you can reap the benefit or get the results out? If you haven't done that, there's nothing that I can do because you're expecting me to put my time, my energy, my money into your program that you haven't even done. If you haven't made an investment into your own future, how do you expect anybody else to do it?
Well, may I just ask a question here? Is there ever a time that the city could consider non-traditional programs? And when I talk about non-traditional programs, many of our agencies don't have facilities, but they have a nonprofit, and they are working with children. Like we had a karate group that was working out of the man's garage. And the beautiful thing about this group is that they did it to keep the kids off the street. And then we ended up funding them just to go to Galveston for competition. And that competition was just to see what it would be like at a karate competition. And so they went down, a couple of the children decided, well, why not try? Let's enter. Well, Buff had paid for transportation and hotel and food, and they got the 25 kids there, and 2 kids decided to participate. Well, those 2 kids came in first in the competitions in which they participated. So then we ended up, they came back and brought us back trophies. So we decided to do something for them by continuing to fund them to go different places. And the wonderful thing about it is that he never got a facility. He never got any other funding other than what we were giving him to take these kids to different places. But they ended up, I guess 3 years later, going to Budapest and coming in first in the world, and then the next year they came in first in the world.
You've already said exactly how I preface this. He put his sweat equity into it. He believed in those children. He put his money, his energy, and certainly his spirit into watching those children grow. And those are certainly the kind of programs that the city wants to fund, because the city understands when you put your all into something, you're just not going to let it go. We want you to take the model that you've already put in place with this money that we're going to give you and expand upon it.
So would you want to use it, I guess what my question was, having a building, would that have impeded him from getting funds from the city of Houston to say that we need a facility now because we got more and more and more kids, but we can't accommodate them in my garage anymore?
I'm thinking, though, that one thing about this man's idea was that it was a small group and it was the concentrated work with him individually. That's a case where maybe putting pressure on him to grow would have destroyed the dynamic of the idea.
Well, he ended up
it has
with
to be
50
up to
kids,
him about whether he wants 100 people.
But he ended up with 50 children, and I think 35 of them ended up going to Budapest.
If I may add a little bit to what you're saying, you're absolutely right. Oftentimes, when you get an organization and you're committed to seeing your mission done, if that's doing karate, you might not be a good business person.
Right.
If you're committed to doing a community garden, you might not have the know-it-all. Black United Fund's responsibility is to come in and do that. And so what we're going to look for is, from a city standpoint, is your collaborative efforts. And I preface all of that by saying, when I first got here and said, self-help. How do organizations and communities come together, pooling their resources, pooling their dollars, pooling their organizations for the common good? That's what this is all about. I'm going to look for organizations that are going to be partnering with other organizations that say, we'll take care of the financial, you take care of the operational, you take care of the organizational, so you have every gamut covered.
Let me ask something here for all three of you. Is that in this kind of situation, who's the matchmaker? Let's take your guy teaching karate to 7 kids in his garage. Where does he find a financial guy to work with him? Where does he find an organizational guy to work with him? Who's the dating service that brings the organization
Let me just kind of tell you how this happened. He didn't have a nonprofit at first, and it's because we go into the workplace. We're in the federal sector, and he was a postal worker, by the way. And he was doing this as a volunteer. He started with his own kids. Well, when we go in and tell you what it is that we do and how we spend your money to make the community better, then we ended up getting a phone call from this guy saying, look, I got these kids I'm working with, and they want to do this competition, and we need some help. We need some funding. Well, one of the things I suggested to him is that, one, you need to get your nonprofit so that people in the community where you are helping, those businesses will then make contributions to you in order for you to do the kinds of things that you need to have done. And that way they become partners with us. Yes, we'll fund a bit of that, but if you have a nonprofit for your kids, then your community will also help fund those opportunities. And let's say, for instance, he said, well, I don't want a nonprofit. Well, Black United Fund will act as his fiscal agent and help him go out and to get funds.
Yeah. Do you intervene to that extent then in these programs?
Yes. Just his program was not a unique one, but a non-traditional one,
right,
like Ms. Johnson said, and that's what we want to continue to help. Besides his, we also have those like Sure Thing. I mean, this young lady who has 100 kids, 100 and something kids, she has an amazing ball every year. She keeps the kids motivated by a trip to Florida, to Disney World.
Yeah.
And they have the chaperones, only 20?
Yeah.
And they take 100 and some kids with them down, and they never have any trouble. But the kids are motivated by the things that she placed in front of them, going on the trip. So they keep their grades up, they stay out of trouble in school. When they have trouble in school, they call her, and everything is immediately taken care of because they know she worked with the parents. That's another great thing. So,
well, let me throw a hypothetical out on the table for you. This year we've had kind of a unique situation with Katrina, among other things, but I've noticed one thing that's grown up spontaneously all across the country have been either teenage girls or women that have collected prom dresses and shipped them down to affected communities to give free prom dresses so the kids can have their proms. Now, this is definitely a grassroots thing that's come up. It didn't require a whole lot of help or organization to do it on a one-shot deal. But when you think about it, this maybe serves a long-term need as well. I'm thinking about probably every school in the country has got girls that hide at home because there's no way for a dress. How do we take something like that spontaneously happens one time and build it into something that's sustainable?
Well, one of the things that, one person is not going to do it. It's got to become a collective effort. And it would be either the persons who decide to do that to come together and decide that they want to start. So there's a centerpiece for collection in order for them to disseminate that. Now, let's say, for instance, they decide not to get a 501c3, but I would go to a nonprofit and say, could you partnership with us so that you can mail this off us rather than us having to mail it off ourselves? So you want to have creative ideas and things to do to help other people are always in the front of us. Many times we don't do it because we don't have a network to help us get it done.
Right.
And we don't necessarily have to cost us any money other than mailing those dresses.
Well, now,
so we very well can do something.
Does Buff follow the news enough so that you might see something like that and call up and
Right.
say,
We will follow up. Like, for instance, there were people who lost their glasses, and so one of our board members is an eye doctor. And so he started providing glasses for everybody who contacted us, so we could get them to him so they could get glasses.
well, we just about used this whole hour up. There are about 4 minutes left, so why don't I just go around the table and each of you take a real quick 30, 45 seconds to say what you want to say.
That's impossible for a politician.
That's why I started
being very new at the city council. But again, I think the whole program, or my platform, is all going to be about self-help. How do we create mindset changes for people to understand it's time that we start to understand the helping hand that will be our own. And that's a motto that Black United Fund has always used, and certainly I will continue to use it on my platform, because we have a lot of richness, we have a lot of culture, we have a lot of resources that are in our community if we simply use them. And use the city for your support system, not as your crutch. And there's certainly a difference in the two.
Yes.
Well, I just want to tell anyone if they're interested in getting off of drugs and being drug-free to contact Narconon, and your local number here is 713-545-8802.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, 713-545-8802, or either they can call either the Councilman's office or Black United Fund of Texas and get access to Narconon.
And my phone number is 713-247-2009.
And again?
713-247-2009.
Okay.
And I want to say for Black United Fund of Texas, we've been around 18 years. We would like you to continue to support us in the workplace, and that's the SECC, the CFC, the CMC, and the HISD, and the Metro. Please continue to support us. Our phone number is 713-524-5767, 713-524-5767.
And if I may throw a question in here, you're the Black United Fund because of history and orientation, but that doesn't mean you would refuse a contribution or assistance from someone like me.
No, sir. We welcome all green.
Let's just make sure that that's...
This is my community.
Yes.
Bendu, do you have anything you want to add?
People helping people, it's great stuff. Short and sweet.
That's it. That's it.
You'll never be a politician. Well, I think that we have had an extremely good discussion tonight, and I know you have opened my eyes about some things. So I want to thank all of you.
Thank you.
From taking time out of a busy schedule to come down here. And I want to tell our viewers, as I usually do, that we're always glad when you call in and ask questions or provide input for us. We love it when you talk to us, but if you're really interested in making changes in the world, the people to talk to are your elected representatives. You're their bosses, you're the only ones that they will listen to, but it's up to you to make that phone call, write that letter, or go to that councilman's office. If you want change in this world, it's up to you to do it. And we've come to the end of another evening. Thank all of you, and thank all of you at home watching as well. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Policy of drug prohibition is hopeless. It is hopeless. It will never get better. Literally, victory today is being defined as slowing down the pace of defeat.
We ought to listen to science and medicine when it comes to whether marijuana or any other substance has a medical benefit.
The fact that marijuana is a less dangerous drug.
We're going full-blown into a program that has failed and failed every other time we tried it. Please point out one success in 30 years of an eradication program that has stopped drugs from coming in this country. Point out one success, because I reviewed that research years ago.